Hey guys, it's Lou. How's everybody doing? It's been about a month since I made my last video, and I've got a few records to show, about 20, so I'm going to go through these, not say a lot about each one, otherwise the video would be too long. So I'm going to start off with some albums where I won the contest that Steve over at Psych in the Valleys had about a month or 2 months ago. Called Show Your Geographicals, and I'd won the prizes from that contest. The main prize was this record by a band called Orange Bicycle, which is a band that I was unfamiliar with. They're a UK band who I think only made this one album, and this came on orange vinyl, and like I said, I was unfamiliar with this band. They have some psych elements to their sound for sure, but also some rock and maybe a little bit of country rock in there. The thing about this band is the lead vocalist sounds to me a little bit like Rod Stewart, and I'm still getting into this. I was completely unfamiliar with it. The thing about this record is there's some original songs by the band, but also some covers by Elton John, of all people, and the only song that I really knew of Elton John's on here is the song "Take Me to the Pilot." So I'm still getting into this album, but thank you, Steve, for sending this my way. And the other prize in Steve's contest was a Record Store Day copy of Pink Floyd's Interstellar Overdrive. Not sure which Record Store Day this was from, but this is a 12-inch, one track on one side, basically a 15-minute version of Interstellar Overdrive, which is excellent, and I'm really enjoying this as well. Then Steve was kind enough to send a couple of bonus items, which I really appreciate, Steve, so thank you very much. The first one is a band that I was familiar with, and wasn't actively searching, but certainly if I found something by this band out in the wild, I would definitely pick it up, and it's the band Family. And I knew of this band because John Wetton of King Crimson was in this band in a later incarnation of the band, and this is Family's debut album called Music in a Doll's House, and this is very psych influenced. This is from, I guess, the late 60s, and I'm really enjoying this one, Steve, so thanks for sending this. The lead vocalist on this, a guy named, I think his name is Roger Chapman, sounds an awful lot to me like Peter Gabriel, early Peter Gabriel, Genesis. So I'm really loving this, so thank you. And the other record that he sent was the debut album by Dusty Springfield, and the only Dusty Springfield I have in my collection is on CD, and I'm really loving this. This is her debut album back from the mid-60s. I think it's from 64. So again, Steve, thanks a lot for sending the stuff, especially the bonus stuff that I'm really enjoying. And then we have some online purchases, a mix of new releases from 2018 plus some reissues. The first one, we have Johnny Marr and his third solo album called Call the Comet. So I'm a big Johnny Marr and Smiths fan, and I have his other two solo albums, which I really enjoy. This one's equally as good as the other albums. Some people are saying it's even better. Some great guitar and vocals on here. A lot of people make comments about Johnny Marr's vocals, but I think really those comments are coming from a place where people, want Morrissey to be singing on the tracks in some cases, but Johnny is a great vocalist, and it takes some time to get used to him singing Smith songs live, but certainly on this album here, they sound fantastic, and this is one of my favorite releases so far of 2018. I was also a big fan of the New York-based band The Walkmen, who disbanded, I think, back around 2012. And the members of the band, less the vocalist, Hamilton Lighthouser, the rest of the members of the band became the backing band for this project called Light Heat. which is fronted by a guy who I'm unfamiliar with, Quentin Stoltzfus. So it's really his project, and the Walkmen play the backing band in about 60% of these tracks, and they do sound like Walkman tracks, maybe a little bit more tamer than the Walkman, but I'm enjoying this. This is just a self-titled album called Light Heat. And a band that I was a big fan of back in the 80s was the House Martins, and then when they disbanded, they formed the Beautiful South, and big fan of the Beautiful South, saw them live several times. This is the Beautiful South's third album, 0898, and I have all their albums on CD and some on cassette, and this is my first Beautiful South vinyl. This is a reissue from this year, or it might be the first time on vinyl, I'm not sure. Their third album, one of my favorite albums of theirs. You might know their first album called Welcome to the Beautiful South, which had the big hit Song for Whoever. So the Beautiful South, formed by Paul Eaton of the House Martins. He took along the drummer, who was also a vocalist, Dave Hemingway, with him, and they added a female vocalist, Brianna Corrigan, to form the Beautiful South that had 3 lead vocalists. And like I said, this is their third album that still have the original lineup together. Has the songs that you might know. Old Red Eyes is back, and We Are Each Other, and 3060. A new band that's new to me, they're on their second album. They're Texas-based, is Khruangbin, I think that's how you say the name. This is their second album called Con Todo El Mundo. I became familiar with this band by seeing them shown by Stavros at the Spinning Greek. He might have shown this album and maybe their first album at one point. Very much an instrumental-based trio with a little bit of vocals, very chilled-out vibe. The drums sound like breakbeats, very brooding kind of bass, and the guitarist, who is the star of the band in my opinion, some psych influences. Also, they sound a little bit to me like the band Dengue Fever, which has a Cambodian influence, but maybe a little bit softer than them. Again, very chilled out vibe, instrumental vibe. There's some great videos of these guys on YouTube, so definitely check them out. Khruangbin, highly recommended. One of my favorite releases of 2018. Then we have one of the kings of ska, Jamaican ska, Prince Buster, and his debut album, I Feel the Spirit. This is a reissue of Prince Buster's first album back from 1963. And I became familiar with Prince Buster because of his influence on many of the British ska bands. So obviously Madness did take their name from a Prince Buster song, and did cover some other Prince Buster songs. They also wrote a song called The Prince, which is about him. And I think the Specials also adapted one of their songs, Gangsters, to include part of a Prince Buster song, I think Al Capone, perhaps. So this, if you like your early Jamaican ska, this is highly recommended, and this is a very good sounding reissue. A psych album that I enjoy quite a bit is the first debut album by the Strawberry Alarm Clock, called Incense and Peppermints. I've had that album for many years. Really love that album, and finally pulled the trigger on getting their second album, Wake Up It's Tomorrow. This is a reissue, and I'm enjoying this. Obviously I'm not into it as much as the first album just yet anyway. Read some reviews where some people actually like this album better than the Incense and Peppermints album. I'm definitely not there yet, but I am glad that I finally got this album. Then just an utter classic that I've had for years on CD, and I don't need to say too much about this. Big favorite. We have Miles Davis, In a Silent Way. This is basically a virtual who's who of jazz all-stars on this. So we have some of Miles, former bandmates, Herbie Hancock and Tony Williams on this. And then we have some great contributions from guys that went on to form their own fantastic fusion bands. So we have John McLaughlin, who I love, who obviously went on to form the Mahavishnu Orchestra. We have Chick Corea, who went on to form Return to Forever. And then we have Wayne Shorter, who played with Miles in his second quintet back in the 60s. Wayne Shorter and Joe Zavino, who both went on to co-lead Weather Report, which is another one of my favorite fusion bands. So if you're wanting to get into Miles fusion and you think maybe Bitches Brew is a little too out there for you, I would definitely recommend In a Silent Way. Another new release from this year, we have Jim James of My Morning Jacket, his latest solo album, Uniform Distortion. This is very different than Jim James's other solo albums in that this is much more guitar-based. His other solo albums are much more keyboard-based and very soulful. This is much more, direct with guitar-based drums and some female vocals on some tracks. I would say it's probably closer to My Morning Jacket than his other stuff, but even My Morning Jacket had some more soulful elements on their later albums. But if you're a fan of his or My Morning Jacket, I think there's stuff here to enjoy for sure. But I would listen to a few clips first. Throwback is a great song on there. I'm also a big Santana fan. And a few years ago, Santana reformed the original lineup minus a couple of guys, and they put out the album Santana 4. And then after that album came out, that album included a couple of guest vocals from Ron Isley. After that album came out, he put out this album with the Isley Brothers called Power of Peace. And there's the lineup on the back: Santana, his wife Cindy Blackman Santana on drums. We have Ernie Isley and Ron Isley. This is a very good album. It's an album of covers. It's a little polished at times, but it does have some great covers. My personal favorites are Higher Ground by Stevie Wonder, Gypsy Woman, which is an Impression song, and Mercy Mercy Me by Marvin Gaye, of course. So I am enjoying this. The next few records came from a collection that this guy was selling. I found out about it through my brother-in-law, who had sent me the spreadsheet of what the guy was selling. And the guy mainly had a lot of 80s and 90s stuff. A lot of it was already sold, and some of the prices, because some of it was really rare, was quite high. So I passed on some items. But here are a few items that I found for a decent price and stuff that I pretty much already knew and had in other formats. The first one is a 45 of the band Mojave 3. And it's a single of their song In Love with the View. Mojave 3 was one of my favorite bands, my favorite band at one point in time. They're formed from the ashes of Slow Dive, Neil Halstead and Rachel Goswell. For Mojave 3, that they went in very much a different direction. This is very much sort of slowcore, alt country kind of stuff. Big fan of this. This is In Love with the View, backed by Prayer for the Paranoid, which is from their third album, Excuses for Travelers. Then we have the band, my first vinyl by this band, James. This is James. This is their second album, Strip Mine. Wasn't familiar with this. This is quite different sounding from the James that I was used to. This is much more jangle pop. This is from, I think, 1988. But yeah, I'm liking it. You still have the very recognizable vocals of Tim Booth on this, and I was much more familiar with James, their albums, Laid, and the songs previous to that, Born of Frustration. I think that was on Seven. That was the James that I was much more familiar with. But this is still very good, early James. I've shown before some albums by the English Beat. It was a favorite band of mine, and then when the English Beat broke up, I got into General Public, and this is one of the members of General Public in the English Beat, the Toaster, Ranking Roger, and his solo album Radical Departure. This is back from the late 80s, I believe, and I think what happened here was some of the songs here were meant to be on a General Public album, but they broke up, and so they found their way on this album. This has very much a General Public kind of 80s feel with some really nice toasting by Ranking Roger. And then another type of music that I was really into back in the early 90s was the whole baggy Manchester scene, and the next are a few releases from that scene. We have one of the bands that I really like, the Soup Dragons, and this is the 12-inch for Mother Universe Sweetmeat, which came from their album Love God, which I would love to get on vinyl, but that was sold. So this was a 12-inch that I picked up, and I used to have this actually on CD. And another couple of Soup Dragons, we have their biggest hit, which is I'm Free, which is a cover of the Rolling Stones track in which they added, I guess, some toasting in the middle of the song. I think it was by Junior Reid. Loved this song. So the Soup Dragons, I'm Free, which was also from the Love God album. And then another 12-inch of the Soup Dragons, which was from their next album, Hot Wired. This is the song Pleasure, and the 12-inch of that. And finally, an album by the band The Farm. The Farm were also part of that baggy Manchester scene, but The Farm were actually from Liverpool. This is I think it was their second album from 1991, Spartacus. This had the big hits Groovy Train and All Together Now, which I absolutely loved. I used to have this on cassette back in the day, and was really thrilled to get this on vinyl. Alright guys, thanks a lot, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.